Okay, perfect. Right. So, right, first question. Also, thank you, Liam, so much for doing this.
Great idea. Thank you for telling me about it after you decided to do it. That was great. Thanks so much for everyone who's dialed in to listen, and hopefully this will be interesting and useful.
Okay, so if and when do you think we might be back to a position where shoots receive income for dead games supplied to dealers, i.e. rather than it being taken away free of charge?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I think the best thing to do is to start off by thinking about where we were when we launched the British Game Alliance 3 years ago. Back in 2017, there was a lot of stress around potential oversupply. Most shoots, I would say, were paying for dead games to be taken away. We're not in that space anymore. People don't tend to talk about oversupply. Most shoots aren't having to pay to have birds taken away. Some are receiving some sort of income, albeit not very much. So I think it's important to acknowledge that progress has been made in this space. But in terms of when we're actually going to deliver proper value back to the shoots, I think it's still part of our DNA here at the BGA that is something we want to achieve. But I do think we need to be realistic about the timescales, particularly in light of what's just happened with COVID. Over the last month, particularly as we've seen some of these more significant supermarket contracts, there has been a sense of trying to make sure there are actually enough birds to meet demand. But that's not likely to be that's not likely to continue even in the short term. We're going to move into December. Shooting's going to start again. There's going to be some fairly intensive shooting, I'd imagine, to try and make sure that we're getting the days in that we've missed over the last month. Then as we move into January, we're going to not lose our route to the European market, but it's going to change fairly radically. We're preparing some advice to circulate shoots literally at the moment. Should be getting that out later on this week. On that point, and we can go into that in a bit more detail if that's interesting, but it's going to change that route to market, so there will be more birds about. So obviously, laws of economics, we're talking about supply and demand. It's a very difficult time to be talking about, well, when will value flow back to the shoots. But as I said, it is a key part of our reason for existing. All these new contracts we're generating, all these new markets we're trying to seek, they're all about driving up that value for game, which has to increase the value of game to the stockist, has to increase the value of the game to the processor. This isn't just about skipping down the supply chain. Everyone has to see more value for this product, which will then result in shoots getting more money for their game.
So they actually asked the second half of the question, but I think before we go on to that, you just touched on January, and obviously that's Brexit. I know we're about to release if you could just summarise what's going to happen to shoots and the game supply chain with Brexit.
Yeah, sure. So we've been talking to DEFRA a lot about this over the last few months. Just today, they've signed off on the guidance note that we've written. We're collaborating with the Countryside Alliance to help us get the message out. The long and short of it, as far as a shoot is concerned, is we will no longer be able to just send birds in feather directly under the channel. So we know that is a route to market that is used. It's perfectly legitimate under EU regulations. That will not be the case come January. So come January, any birds, whether they are in feather or not, cannot be exported to the EU unless they have first gone through an approved game handling establishment. So that, and kind of as far as shoots are concerned, that's really all they need to know right now, because what this means is if at the moment that isn't your route to market, if at the moment they are going straight under the channel or over the channel, you need to do something new. What that something is will be to a large extent dictated by the processor that you as a shoot then go and speak to. So if your birds are going to continue to go to Europe, and potentially there'll be some coordination from European buyers on that, we don't know at this point, there are various things that will now have to be done that currently are not requirements. Things like needing approved hunter status on the shoot, segmenting the birds by the day on which they're shot, and from the processor's perspective, getting them signed off by an official veterinarian to provide an export health certificate. So all that stuff might have to happen, but obviously that's not your responsibility as a shoot to decide that. You may find a processor who wants to sell your birds domestically, in which case that stuff won't apply. So it's not necessarily a concern for the shoot to figure out all this new stuff. We will be working with our processors to make sure that they're getting the support that they need, and they will then be able to inform the shoots that contact them of what the requirements are for whatever market it is they're going to go out to sell those birds to. So what we'll be doing at BGA is just kind of facilitating that transfer of information. If any shoot needs help finding a BGA registered processor, we again can kind of help with that flow of information, let you know who those people are, how to speak to them, and they'll be able to advise you as a shoot of their requirements and whether they can take your game, and if so, what they're going to need you to do.
Yes, and we will be posting that up on the website this afternoon.
Yes, yeah, of course. We just had DEFRA approved, haven't we? So yeah,
so I'll get up as soon as we can. So the second half of that original first question, sorry before I interrupted with Brexit, said, what do shoots need to do to ensure they give themselves the best possible chance to be paid by dealers for dead game?
So, I mean, the short answer to that is just to really carefully follow the BGA standard, and that sounds like a really sort of cliche answer, but it's true. You know, we've heard from processors, including processors that actually are not registered with us, that since the BGA came into being, the quality of game they are receiving has gone up, and the quality of BGA game is better than non-BGA game. That's not universal. You know, I know we obviously we do get complaints from people saying that they've had game delivered to them from BGA shoots that isn't up to standard, but that's why we have a scheme. That's the whole point. We can hear about that. We can go and speak to those shoots and address that situation. And so that's brilliant. So, you know, that's what we're trying to do. And this does also come back to your question, or rather the members' question about how we're going to get value back into birds. You know, it's just not right to think that processors are sort of taking loads of value out, and that's why the shoots aren't seeing it. They have to contend with wastage and all sorts of expenses and costs. And the more that the shoots can do to get that cost down, the easier it will be for eventually, you know, we are talking quite some time, for value to flow back down the supply chain to the shoots for their shot game. And that's all about treating game as food from, you know, literally when you're ordering poults. It's about not ordering strains of pheasant that are too small to produce a decent table bird. Certainly it's about shooting birds with half an eye to making sure that the product being produced is not, there's not a load of wastage. Once it's been shot, once it's hit the ground, instantly that is now meat. It needs to be treated as such. It needs to be put on the game trailer, you know, nice and spaced so it can cool down. It needs to be chilled quickly. Everything that we know that's in the standard, that's what's important in terms of getting that wastage down, increasing the value to the dealer, and then in the long term increasing the value to the shoot. So, but all that is in the standard. So it is about following the standard as closely as possible in terms of game meat hygiene, to make sure we're producing a good product for the table.
I think we also, we've got some documents actually that show how to like lay your game out and stuff that go set alongside the standards, just as something that's a bit of a helpful extra if anyone ever wants us to send that across. You know, if I'm sure most people who are our members know how to look after their game, but this actually leads quite nicely into the next question. What is the future for shooting with the demand for lead-free shot game from retail and the lack of appetite for cartridge manufacturers and shoots to move over to lead-free? Oh, it's a punchy one.
That is a punchy one, but I mean, yeah, this has obviously been a really hot topic in shooting in 2020. Whenever we had a time to stop worrying about the coronavirus, we would worry about lead. And it's fairly easy to see why. You know, this is a fairly seismic shift. We at the BGA have always been driven by the end user. And to be honest, by the end user, what we really mean is stockists, major multiples, supermarkets. You know, we can all kind of debate whether this is actually being driven by public demand. Do the public care about whether there's lead in game? Does the science hold up? You know, is this something that politically we need to do? These are all questions that are regularly debated by everyone in game shooting, and everyone's got a view on what the organisation should do about this. I think we at the BGA, we've got a slightly more straightforward approach, because our job, you know, we've got this threefold mission: this promote, develop, assure. The promotion bit is all about getting as much game meat as possible into supermarkets and other large stockists and outlets. Those guys do not want lead in their product. It's as simple as that. You know, we saw that video the Game Conservancy put out recently, the chat from Sorry?
With John Gregson.
Sorry, John Gregson. Yeah, exactly. Explaining why Waitrose in future would not be taking lead shot birds, and that's the way it's going. So we at the BGA, we're not driving it. We're not trying. We're not pushing lead free. What we are doing is trying to help our members and help the shooting sector get ready for something that is coming. And so to come back to the question, I can't quite remember exactly how it was phrased, but there was something in there about lack of appetite. I don't really recognise the lack of appetite. We've got major cartridge manufacturers, at least 4 I can think of off the top of my head, producing steel ammunition that can go through most guns. I think there's at least one load out there that will go through an Old English side-by-side if the chokes are opened up. The development is happening. The products are there. They're not there in the quantities. I think this is the really important thing, and this is the other part of our role. We at the BGA, we kind of stand in the middle, in between the shooting community and the stockists and the major multiples and what have you. And we can say to the shooting community, look, this is what's happening. This is what you need to get ready for. Equally, we can be saying to the supermarkets and the stockists, there's just not enough of this stuff out there yet. This lead-free ammunition that can go through the guns that we're using to harvest pheasants. There's not enough out there to meet all of your needs. So, we need to kind of give that message equally in both directions to make sure that both sides are working together towards where we need to end up, which is essentially a lead-free product. So I think that there is the appetite out there. People are beginning to adopt it. There's been loads of stuff in the shooting press recently about people trying these loads, finding they're really effective. It's a cultural shift. I think it is going to happen fairly soon. And I think we're going to be needing to source lead-free birds to meet certain contracts as of next season. So what's that, 21, 22? I think we all need to be prepared that that's something that certainly we at the BGA are going to need to start working on for our stockists and working with our members to make sure we can actually do that, just to make sure we are maintaining that supply of birds into the public food chain.
Yeah, I mean, we do actually have some shoots that are totally steel shot already, which I think is great. They're totally ahead of the trend. So
yeah, we do. And again, it's a difficult one because which is brilliant. And we put out something back in the summer asking for shoots that are fully either are or are considering being fully non-lead, fully lead-free, to let us know. Not because we're trying to drive that, not because we're trying to push that, but because that's something that we're being asked by our end users. And I suspect that next year, in the build-up to 2022, we will get a lot more people saying to us, can you source us lead-free birds? And that's what we need to work out, is how do we at the BGA, how are we going to say with confidence, yes, we can, and this is where you can get it from. But that's the next stage of development in this debate.
I suppose this links to the next question. What are the main challenges facing the BGA over the next year, and what do you think of the solutions?
So, main challenges. That one we've just discussed is certainly a big challenge. It's how are we, as given our role, how are we going to navigate this issue around lead? I think up until, let's kind of take the government at their word here. We reckon April is going to be when there's going to be, is it 75% of the population vaccinated, and the pandemic will, to some extent, be behind us in terms of its immediate impact. Well, April is still a little ways off, So I think we need to be prepared for a bit more uncertainty. 2020 has all been about being fairly reactive, which I think we've done pretty well. We're quite a nimble organisation, and I think we've spent a lot of time informing government of the needs of our sector and informing our sector of the needs of government. I suspect there's going to be a bit more of that. Will there be a third wave? Will we get to April without further restrictions? That's the sort of stuff that we need to that we're going to need to navigate again. But at least at this point, we've got the lines of communication in place, and I think we know what we're doing. But touching wood, an April vaccination date should mean a fairly secure 21-22 shooting season. So we can start getting ready for that, which is brilliant. So we've spent 2020 trying to get game into the home. It's obviously Great British Game Week at the moment. That's our emphasis because that's where everybody is. So that's what all our work has been about. So we've had these fantastic successes with Sainsbury's and the Co-op, giving people, and all our online stockists as well, giving people access to game at home. hopefully next year we can start thinking about, well, how are we going to diversify this audience? We've got two really exciting new outlets which we're going to be talking about in the new year that are like really exciting. They're new people eating game in fairly substantial quantities, and that's going to be the space in which we're going to be operating, trying to find new audiences to build on what we've done this year. So that's going to be the next challenge. And then finally, and probably more pressingly in terms of, there's only a month this year left, but we need to be working on this now. The other big challenge is going to be around assurance. And what do we want as a shooting community in terms of our shoot assurance? Are we aiming for a fully assured shooting sector? Now, our view at the BGA is yes, we do. That's absolutely necessary. We assure the shooting of game for meat. Well, that's all game. If you're shooting game, you're eating it. So as far as we are concerned, assurance should be a thing that people can access in that space. We know what's happening at the moment with DEFRA reviewing the release of game on specially protected sites. We've seen the RSPB all over the press with their review of shooting policy. We've seen the Times leader calling for licensing and shooting. This is really at the forefront of public policy debate at the moment. And I think the BGA has a role to play here in helping as many shoots as possible access credible shoot assurance. So we've got something to push back with. When I say we, the collective shooting community and our shooting organisations have got something to push back with and say, look, actually, we are doing this already. We are embracing self-regulation, we're embracing shoot regulation through this credible, independently assured scheme. And to do that, frankly, we need more people to join. We need to have a greater cross-section of the shooting community joining the standards and supporting the idea of self-regulation in shooting. And that, as I say, it is a challenge for 2021. It's actually a challenge for right now. This is a pressure that's already here.
Yeah, it's quite scary. I think also I just would like to, I think having the audit as well, lots of people think it's sort of to hang you out to dry, but it's not at all. It's all about, okay, you've got one or two things that aren't quite in line with the standards, that's not a problem. I think that's a message that it's quite hard to get across, because when you hear an audit, you're like, oh, that sounds quite scary. So
no, absolutely. And without wanting to sort of create a huge list of things we want to try and achieve next year, I think you're right. Getting more sort of buy-in to the audit part of what we're doing, getting people kind of wanting to have these auditors to come along and have a look and give the feedback and help people meet the standard, which is really what it's all about. Equally, we need to have another look at the standards. So I'm quite keen to get some new structures in place around that, around reviewing the standard, making sure that it's doing what we need it to do without being too excessive and too bureaucratic. So that everyone is reaching the standard that we as a whole shooting community, this is always based on the Code of Good Shooting Practice. It is the agreed standard for game shooting. It's just about making sure that we're assessing it in a way that everyone finds accessible and user-friendly.
Sorry, I've lost my place. Why is it that the shooting community is so fragmented and appears to be disjointed on key parts of the shooting agenda? The COVID communication is one example. Sorry.
Right. Okay. Well, to pick up on the COVID communication one, I would not put that at the feet of a fragmented shooting community. I'm afraid I would lay that at the door of the rules changing so rapidly, and us trying to keep pace with it. I mean, I've literally just dialed off a call of the COVID liaison group with colleagues from across the shooting organisations before I joined this, and that was all about reviewing all the guidance that came out yesterday and trying to interpret it to give people a bit of a steer, because this is the fundamental problem. Everyone, our members are shoots and game farms. Our shooting members are trying to plan days for December. And the amount of confusion over this 2nd of December date and whether or not you can arrange a shoot on that day it's been an absolute nightmare. So I'm not surprised that people think that this is sort of, I forget the wording of the question, but there's some kind of fracturing between the organisations. That's actually not what it is. It's about trying to interpret the regulation. And so to give a little kind of insight into this, we have the guidance that appeared yesterday. So on the call we've just had, we've been through the guidance and we're trying to decide, well, what can we actually say to our members so they can usefully plan next week? Because the actual regulations with the laws that will underpin this won't appear until Thursday at the absolute earliest. And obviously people, they need this information now. So I think our attempts to respond as quickly as possible possibly give the impression that we've got slightly different positions when actually we don't. We are trying to agree and coordinate very much what we're saying on this because it's too important for us all to take different positions.
Yeah. It's been, I know you and I have sat for a long time trying to work out legislation and things that just wasn't clear. And I've had massive personal fights on Twitter with people.
Yeah, well, it doesn't help when the guidance contradicts itself and legislation says X and the guidance says Y, and there has been a bit of that. And, you know, it's cut the government a bit of slack, I suppose. This is new to them as well, and they're working at 1 million miles an hour, and shooting is our livelihoods and our lives, and it's one thing to them amongst many things they have to resolve. So it's challenging all round, but we're doing our best to keep the communication clear. Certainly our position is we're not at the BGA, and I can only speak for the BGA, we are waiting until we have everything confirmed with all our partner organisations, and then we send out our communication. And so I'm sorry if some of our members, I mean, I don't quite know the genesis of the question, but if some of our members would rather see things slightly quicker, I totally get that. We're just trying to get it right as right as it can be before we put stuff out.
And then the next question, will the BGA become the main leader as the voice of game shooting standards?
No, absolutely not. That's not what we're for. I mean, the phrasing of the question, standards, I guess, that's our thing. But to my mind, you've got two different things going on in that question. So standards, that's what we were created to do. You know, we've got this three-part mission, this promote, develop, assure. We promote game meat, we develop a modern 21st century shooting sector from egg to plate, and we assure the shooting of game. Those are the three things we do. So within that bit, that, you know, we will be the organisation that pushes that on with our partners, but we're not going to be the leading organisation in shooting, because those organisations already exist. You know, I won't name them all, we all know who they are. But equally, we can't do what we need to do if we are also trying to be the voice of shooting or the lobbying voice for shooting or whatever, because our assurance needs to do two things. It needs to underpin our marketing operation. So when we're talking to a supermarket, we need to be able to talk about credible and independent assurance. And equally, when the organisations that are doing the political lobbying, when they want to point to an assured shooting sector, that can't be assurance being delivered by an organisation that wants to be promoting the activity of shooting. You know, that's not credible. So we need to be an independent operation, assuring the shooting of game, promoting the game meat, but with the BGA has no sort of ambition to run shooting. That's not what we're here for.
That was a tough question.
That was a very tough question. Sorry.
What are the key successes of the BGA since setup? And also, no, sorry, you haven't been here. But
that's a much kinder question than the last one. Yeah. Okay, so three key successes as I see them, and there may be a bit of recency bias here because obviously I've been in post for 7 months, but I'll try not to just say everything that's happened this year. So three key successes. So I think the first thing would be the marketing successes. You know, we've just seen an assured product go onto the shelves of Sainsbury's. You can find it on the shelves of the Co-op. We've already talked about how over the last 3 years we've gone from a situation where people were fretting about oversupply, paying for game to be taken away. Now game is being picked up either free of charge or for a very small value, and we're not hearing the concerns about oversupply anymore, particularly. And as I say, we're seeing game in entirely new places, and we have these very exciting new developments to talk about early next year as well. So I think the first that would be my first sort of key success. The second would flow from that. The meat that's appearing on the shelves of supermarkets, it's got a logo on it that says it's assured, and that's the first time that's ever happened. It now looks as credible as a farmed meat product that's got that red tractor on it, or whatever it happens to be. And that is absolutely vital. This is the 21st century, and if people want to buy meat, they want to see some sort of assurance, and the BGA has created that to a level of credibility that it's being accepted by such major outlets. So I think that is a huge thing. And to come back to the point about the challenges for 2021, if we're going to be talking about the need for shoot assurance, at least we have developed, even if the uptake isn't as large as we'd like it to be at this point, we have developed a tool that is that credible, that we can now get more people to buy into. We have it. So if we want to push back against the pressures for external licensing, we do have something there that we can use that we know is credible. So my second thing, so marketing success is the creation of the of independent assurance. And then I think the third thing, and I appreciate this is quite a recent one, is the development of our relationship with DEFRA. So to my mind, or to my knowledge, and certainly having worked for DEFRA prior to coming to do this job, there just wasn't a voice for game meat around sort of industry forums. And again, we talk about game meat, we're talking about everyone who shoots game here. But there's industry forums that sit down with officials to talk about policy issues that are going to affect their sectors, and everybody would be there except game. And now we're there. So the BGA is a member of two regular meeting groups that are looking to get through Brexit, to get through COVID, and we are able to voice the concerns of our sector, and we're able to answer questions on behalf of DEFRA. And more informally, we get questions from our members, from processors, from stockists, from shoots, about things that are concerning them, and we've been able to get answers within a day from relatively senior officials, and that's just not a facility that game shooting had historically, and now we do. So I think that's been a very key success.
Having been at the BGA since the beginning, the relationship with DEFRA I found the most exciting part of being, watching the BGA grow and actually being taken seriously as, alongside all the other meat organisations. I just think it's fantastic, and it's so excitain.
How do you feel that way when you
I was the person who cried when I saw the logo on the Sainsbury's shelves. So I realised that I take this all very personally, but yeah, I think the DEFRA thing is so important. Oh no, this is okay now. Why have the BGA, BASC and CA? Surely one effective body should suffice.
Oh, right. So, okay, I've heard this quite a lot, and I'm actually fairly militant on my answer to this, because I just don't accept the premise. And I didn't accept the premise before I went to work for DEFRA. I definitely don't accept it now. So there's a couple of reasons for that. First one is, when you look at the conservation, let's call them the green movement, because shooting is conservation, and we all know that. Everyone on this call knows that. But hopefully everyone knows what I mean when I say the green movement. They do not have one organisation. They have tens and tens of organisations. Google the Green Alliance and look at every organisation that's a part of that. Now, they're quite good at operating with a voice, which is the Green Alliance. So I kind of accept that point, that a kind of coherent voice is useful, but they're not all one organisation. And so that means two things. One, there's lots of seats around the table for their many organisations. And two, when they do all feel the need to speak as the Green Alliance in one sort of coherent voice, it looks really credible because it's 40 odd organisations backing up one position. And I don't actually think that if you merged all these shooting organisations into one, that it would be that effective. You'd go from 4 or 5, 6, 7, 8 seats around the table to 1 seat around the table. So I think just from that really kind of simplistic, pragmatic position, I don't really accept the premise. Equally, I think there is a role for specialisation. I think of the organisations that were just mentioned there, and you can add so many more organisations to that, and I won't do the list in case I forget somebody and cause offence, but we've got all these different shooting organisations who all specialise in different things, whether that be politics and lobbying, science, representing gamekeepers, representing the moorlands. You know, there is a real role for specialisation here. That these organisations all have something that they are extremely good at. So with the BGA, we spend all our time working on that three-part mission. It is all about promoting game meat, developing the shooting sector, and assuring the shooting of game. And that's what we do. That's what we spend all our time on. And then just to kind of really, for a third point, just to really kind of zone in on the BGA here, I also think, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, if there were one shooting organisation and the BGA existed as now, I would not think the BGA should be a part of it. Because whilst the shooting community created the BGA, and it's massively to the credit of the shooting communities rather, that we kind of came into being, or were brought into being by the shooting community, we can't be a shooting organisation if we are to be credible in assuring our product, marketing our product, and letting the actual shooting organisations go out there and talk about the value of an independently assured shooting sector. You know, you couldn't have this hypothetical one big shooting organisation doing that. I don't believe, because it just wouldn't be credible as independent assurance.
So you just touched on sort of the BGA coming into being there. And I think probably a lot of people who are our members don't realise that you were sort of quite integral to sort of helping the BGA sort of get off the ground. Do you want to explain a little bit how you helped?
Yeah, I mean, if that's interesting, I think the way you just framed it is exactly right. I helped get it off the ground, in so much as my view of its kind of genesis and its creation is it grew out of shooting. It grew out of our community as something that everyone recognised was necessary. There was loads of different people involved. At the time, I was head of campaigns at the Countryside Alliance. The Alliance is and was very, very supportive, and so yeah, I did a lot of the writing, a lot of the PR, a lot of the preparation of the initial standard, and I've always been a huge supporter of the idea of a fully assured shooting sector and a vibrant game meat market. So yeah, I've been a believer in the BGA since before the BGA existed. So it's a real privilege to be doing what I'm doing now.
It's very nice to have you as part of the team now, the official team. Right. Any advice as to how we can best prepare and market our own shot game to guns and visitors to the shoot and estate? And then in brackets says, i.e. in terms of backpacks, labels, branding, etc.
Okay. So I suppose the first thing on this, which is actually really dull but really important, is some of the rules around this are probably going to change, currently subject to consultation, but just the way that the question was phrased caught my ear slightly, that we're talking about marketing, and it sounds a little bit like we might be going beyond the kind of giving a brace of birds in feather to the guns type situation. So under the current wild game guide, you can give away birds in feather without anyone being, as in to your guns, not to anyone else, without anyone wanting you to do any sort of paperwork. In future, unless those birds are literally going into your direct household, you're going to need to register with your local authority as a food business. Certainly, if you're going to be sending birds away to be processed and getting them back, and then again, to use the wording of the question, marketing them, I would suggest you probably already need to be doing that. Needs to be getting registered as a food business. So that's the first slightly boring bit. More generally, I think anything creative has got to be a good thing. I mean, if you're doing this, if this is part of your model and you're a BGA shoot, absolutely get in touch with the office and get yourself some BGA logos to put on your product. You know, hopefully it's going, if you're using a BGA processor, they can also help you with that. But that would be the first thing I would say. And then anything you can do to get away from the bird in feather towards something that people can readily eat, I think has got to be a great move. So whether that's getting it processed into pies or sausage rolls or whatever it is, I think anything that you can do to kind of add value and encourage people to eat it in different and more diverse ways, and then whoever your guns can potentially share it with their friends, you know, that's got to be a big part of the future. And I know this is one of Louisa's things, so she can't hear me because she's all the way over there and I'm here, but I would also say on packaging, as little plastic as possible, please. We're talking about how sustainable game is. We absolutely have to be
kind of carrying that through into our packaging, as well as our messaging around how we produce it and harvest it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we kind of lost, the days of just taking birds home in the feather. So many people are driving back into cities where, I know, friends trying to process on their back, do the bird on the balcony has not gone down well with their neighbours. So things like sausages, can go in the freezer if they're too busy that week and stuff like that. It's always great. And thank you for mentioning no plastic. This goes on to, have relationships improved with the processors?
Our relationships with our processors are really strong at the moment, I think. I've met with, well, certainly everyone that wanted a meeting, which I think is the majority of our registered processors, and it's been really productive. It's been a really good year in terms of working with them. Over the glorious 12th, we worked with our guy, Mac and Wild, on our grouse restaurant kits, which went out an absolute storm, and the media PR work on that was really strong. And we couldn't have done it without our processor partners. Similarly, this week, obviously again, Great British Game Week, we've got Brayhead doing their Cook School Curry Night, which again, we've collaborated with them, we've promoted that. There's been loads of stuff like that. We're working with loads of different processors on loads of different projects, and I'm obviously not going to be able to name them all. But my sense is it's a really productive relationship now. We're just really keen to make sure that anything that is collaborative, everyone's kind of involved in the messaging, everyone's involved in the execution of the projects, and they're genuine collaborations, because at the end of the day, that's what we're here to do. We're here to improve, and well, I was going to say trying to improve their the value they're getting. But I guess what I'm trying to say is we're here to work with them. We're here to hopefully make their lives easier and to bring some real tangible benefit to what they're doing, which then hopefully in time will flow back to our Shoot members.
Great. Yeah, I think it's going well. We have got one question come through, but it's sort of, I think, been answered. Yeah. Great to know more about your plans for early 2021, but I think you answered that earlier. I don't know if anyone else has questions they'd like to type in now. I have a question from me. What are you going to be cooking for the rest of Game Week?
Oh, right. Okay. So I did my brunch yesterday.
Yeah, I went on a storm on social media.
I absolutely did not manage to get finished at what any kind of time would be considered brunch, but I did manage to get it finished, and it was very tasty. I was really pleased that actually those muffins, the Tim Madden's muffin recipe, which if you haven't seen it, it's on Eat Wild. It's under the pheasant sliders, which is like a mini burger jobby, but he does it with these muffins that you cook in the pan, and they're brilliant. They are so good in terms of like really easy baking. It's not baking, is it? Because it doesn't go in the oven. But I don't know. Is that a definition of baking? Yeah. But they're really tasty. They're really good. So I'm going to be doing that again. But in terms of sort of future things, the rest of this week, I'm going to be doing a venison burger with pulled pheasant for me and my little girl, possibly tonight. Definitely like a little treat family dinner doing that. And what else have I got planned? The pheasant tortellini. I've got some pheasant tortellini in the freezer. I'm going to cook that. Yeah. I'm trying to work out what to cook it with. I can't decide what flavour, like sauce, to put on that. I'm no great gourmet chef or anything, so I'm just like hitting Google, trying to work out what goes well with those sorts of flavours that someone like me can pull off in my kitchen. So at some point this week, I'll be doing that.
Great.
Those are my next two challenges.
Yeah, I think I might try the tortellini tomorrow, but with some mushrooms or something. Have a think.
I'll wait till you've done yours then, and
no. I might be
I'll adapt accordingly.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. I don't think there are any other questions, but that's been very helpful. And obviously, as our members, if anyone does ever have any questions, always contact the office. But always, even if you think it's something silly, it actually might be really important. So.
Yeah, absolutely right. Always delighted to hear from members and answer questions and hear their feedback. And yeah, any views they have on the future of the BGA and how we need to be moving this forward, always gratefully received.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time, Liam.
No problem.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.